Welcome to another thrilling episode of Lake Avalon Entertainment's podcast, Nightshade. This podcast is an anthology of original short stories which delve into the realms of science fiction, suspense, fantasy, psychological thrillers, and more. These stories are not necessarily connected, so start with any episode that captures your imagination. Make sure you check out LakeAvalonEntertainment.com for show notes, extras, information about our cast and crew, and our upcoming projects. You can also link our original podcasts while there. Follow us on social media to stay up to date with the latest happenings at Lake Avalon Entertainment. Now, we'd like to invite you to take a stroll with us to a place where the most vibrant color is a shade of gray, and the bizarre is a norm. According to Thomas Wolfe, you can't go home again. And for those who have tried, the experience is often met with disappointment and heartache. But if you could roll back the clock and really go home, even if it were for a mere few minutes, what would you do and with whom? Welcome to Nightshade. Meet Falcon Haley, a young man full of regret. He carries it around like most of us carry a wallet or purse, but he's going to be given a chance to unload some of that grief into the same icy air he once knew and embraced as a boy. Will he take the opportunity or run away like he did before? Presenting Nightshade, Episode 4, Fireflies on the Frozen Pond.
When I was young, I found out that things aren't always as they seem, and dying is a lot like getting born. Painful and frightening, yet oh so new. Well, to clarify, it's a lesson that began when I was just a kid, but was realized just this last winter. Man, thinking back on myself as a kid is like watching a movie about me being played by some Hollywood prodigy. Either that or a stranger kidnapped the guy I once knew and replaced him when I wasn't looking. You decide. Anyway, when I was on the cusp of becoming a teen, but still hanging on to the things that really matter, I found out that the world didn't actually revolve around me, and that there was a lot more of it than what stretched out just beyond my backyard and the school playground and the stores in town. Home. Isn't it funny how big it seems when you're young, and then how small it actually is when you see it through grown-up eyes? But oh, how grand it is when you're at a far, regardless how old you are. My family owned some property north of Mackinac. Back then, before life got so complicated, with money and bills and the affairs of the heart. It was situated well over the bridge, but south of Canada. It was a special place and a special time, because I had loved ones all around me. We lived in a big old farmhouse, and even though we owned a sizable chunk of land to complement the old place, nothing ever grew there for us to harvest. This had my folks often bickering about this and that, and seemed to be the source of the ever-deepening worry lines emerging on my grandma's face. And all of it, in turn, had my grandpa, who had recently been freed contractually from the industrial shackles in which he had been bound for the last 20 years of his life, taking regular walks, lengthy ones, at an unhurried pace. But it never much concerned me. None of it. I was too young to care. In fact, Mom used to tell me,
Falcon R. Haley, if you don't walk on solid ground, sooner or later you'll either fall through the cracks or float away.
Yeah, I know, Mom.
I'm just concerned for you, Falcon. You've got to learn to be a man one day. I won't be here to do your dishes forever. Someday, you're going to want to get married, move out, have your own life, your own kids.
Mom, it's so far away.
It will come faster than you can imagine.
I won't have to do the dishes because I'll just buy paper plates and throw them away.
You'll have to get a good job to keep up with that lifestyle.
I'm going to be an astronaut. I might even walk on the moon. Believe me, I'll make tons of money.
I hope so, honey. I really hope so. You know, if you're bored, I could use some help folding the laundry.
I'm not bored. I'm gonna go see what Grandpa's doing. Yesterday he showed me a secret about catching things in the pond. I think I got it.
Fishing? Again?
Grandpa loved fishing with me, Ma. You know that.
Please be careful. Your grandpa is an old man. He can't be doing all of those things that you do anymore.
I promise I won't hurt him.
He might hurt himself.
Grandpa knows what he's doing.
I hope you're right.
Mom just didn't understand the important things in life anymore. That's what Gramps and I were doing when I learned about his broken heart. But we'll come to that soon enough. It was a spring morning, as I recall, and a very brisk wind had me whining to old Gramps about going back in almost as quick as we rode out. He smiled, however, and told me that the best things come to those who have patience enough to wait for them. He always had a proverb handy and a smile to back it up. To me, he, the great Lieutenant Robert Haley, was bigger than life. And I loved him as much as I loved hockey. And to an 8-year-old Youper, that was a lot. Gramps and I did everything together, that year especially. We were boozing buddies, Johnny Sacco and his giant robot, Batman and Robin, Iserman and Shanahan, Rick Marshall and Grumpy the T-Rex, you name it, and we were game. And now that I look back at it in hindsight, I realized I probably pushed the old guy beyond his limits. But he never complained to me about it. Moreover, somehow kept up with me. And since Dad was so preoccupied with all that grown-up stuff with which he was currently captivated, Gramps took me under his wing and showed me the ropes to quite a few things concerning manhood. From baiting my own hook, to the manly craft of wielding a barbecue flame, to replacing an alternator, specifically the one on his classic Studebaker, which he promised one day would be mine. I remember the morning he showed me how to shave most distinctly. It stands out because Mom had a conniption fit, and that was the first time Gramps' ticker seemed to start giving him trouble. Additionally, the first time I ever heard talk about orbs and phantoms. It was early that winter, and though I hadn't even grown in my peach fuzz, I was quite serious about understanding this male rite, and the technique that accompanied it. I even went as far as to fish one of Dad's razors out of the garbage, albeit it had the protective cap snapped in place, which I never removed per Grandpa's orders.
Gotta make sure you moisten your whiskers first, and don't ever run your razor against the grain. Cut the dickens out of yourself if you do it that way.
He used an old straight razor, not one of those cheap throwaway jobs like Dad always did. It was long and sharp and flickered every time it hit the beam from the light fixture just the right way. What's more, it looked like it dated back to when Gramps was my age. He would take a swipe, rinse in the sink, and then wait for me to repeat the motion. Chuckling over my lack of skill, he told me it reminded him of when he taught Dad how to shave, only I was picking up the craft with much more ease. Then he took a washcloth and wiped away the excess shaving cream and replaced it with a musky-scented liquid from an old dirty bottle.
What's that, Grandpa?
Aftershave. It's what makes a man a man.
I knew Gramps was a man. More man than most. He didn't have anything to prove to me in that regard. I remember thinking, however, that whatever that stuff was in the bottle, if it was the stuff that made him the man he was, then I wanted to swim in it. He spilled a little out onto my hand, and I dabbed it on my face, just as he had done. It took a second or two. Then I found out why Gramps cringed at its touch. But unlike him, I screamed, which caused him to erupt into a deep resonating laughter, and consequently had my mom rushing in, mad as a hornet.
Dad, what are you doing to my son?
Your face.
Are you okay, Falcon? What's going on? Let me take a look at it.
I'm fine. It's just aftershave.
Did you get it in any cuts? A straight razor? You were using a straight razor on my son? Dad, he could have slit his own throat.
Mom, seriously?
Dad? Dad, are you okay?
Grandpa?
Gramps held his left arm as though it were the Holy Grail, and then fell backward, foaming at the mouth. It was a terrifying incident, one that still gets the best of me on the rare occasion I think on it. But the most unnerving aspect of the entire ordeal was when he started talking about floating balls that shimmered and shadow hands protruding from the walls.
Oh, look at the walls. They're coming. They're coming from the walls.
What are you talking? Grandpa, I don't understand.
Can you see them glow? They're everywhere now. The shadows are reaching out for me.
Dad, look at me. Don't go to them. Can you hear me? Don't go to them. We need you.
What's happening, Mom?
Get your grandma, Falcon. Call 911 and get an ambulance here now. I'll stay with your grandpa.
But Mom, I don't want to leave him.
Go. Please, Falcon. Please, go.
Of course, I didn't quite understand what was happening, nor would I until that spring day out on the pond. And even then, it seemed more like a game that Gramps was playing with me. See, Gramps was rarely serious about anything, at least anything that really concerned me, so I never knew the difference between when he was just goofing or the rare instance when he included me into an adult matter. Of course, once his color started changing, even I figured that something was terribly wrong. What's more, those orbs and phantoms that Gramps was talking about, and Mom told me to stay away from, she might not have been able to see them. But I did. They were everywhere. Just like Grandpa said. Shadow hands would shoot straight out of the wall, and the little glowing orbs would attack them as soon as they laid so much as a finger on the old man. It was frightening and exhilarating all at once. I never saw anything like that before, but it wouldn't be the last time. Gramps was sentenced to 2 weeks in the hospital and another month of take it easy time, so prescribed by the doctors who worked on him. And all because he was amid the diligent task of playing out his second childhood with me. I felt bad about that, and I visited him almost every day because of it. Room 454. It became as routine as eating and going to sleep. And he became as frustrated as a puppy in crate training while there. He hated being bedridden, and he hated the in-house food even more. Though most of the time, he just gave it to me. In fact, on the 3rd day, he had me sneak him in a couple slices of pizza from the local deli. Mom and Grandma would have had my hide if they found out. Thank goodness they didn't. But I knew I was wrong for having relented to the old man. He had that way with people, though. You didn't always know why you were doing what he asked of you. You just did it. No questions asked. Hell, he could have taught the walleye into catching itself, gutting itself, and serving itself for dinner. If he knew how to talk fish, that is. But I knew I had to be tough if he was ever going to get better and come home. God knows I missed him something fierce. So on the 7th day, I refused to bring him in food from the outside. And boy, he got infuriated with me about that. In fact, he made quite the scene, which caused his heart rate to become sporadic, the nurses to rush in and see what was the matter, and me to cry. Furthermore, he called me things he had never before so much as said in front of me at the expense of those he disliked the most. I never saw him so angry. I refused to visit him for days following the ordeal. However, when I finally did return, he seemed to be himself again. He even tried to apologize, in his own way.
Hey, sport, listen. About all that stuff I said the other day, it ain't right for a man to tell his grandson. What I'm trying to say is that, well, my mom, she always led by example, see? And I did my best to follow her lead. Now, she was no saint, but she cared enough to care. And she would have been real disappointed in my actions the other day. You're a good boy, Sport. So don't you ever let me hear you saying those things that I said. Are we clear?
He looked at me with a most sincere expression and then glanced down at the dish that the orderlies had just brought him. He proceeded to take the top off and snarl in disgust. Then, with a huff, he reached down and grabbed the fork sitting to the side of it. I wasn't sure what it was that they served him, but it was noodly and goopy and didn't smell all that appetizing. All the same, Gramps scooped up a forkful and shoveled it into his mouth. It took about a minute for him to get it down, but when he did, he opened up to show me, then shot me out a smile and a wink, and went back for more.
Something else I want to talk to you about.
I waited for him to continue, but he seemed to be preoccupied with the food he was forcing down. After each mouthful, he cringed, then followed it with another, until finally, the plate was clean.
About those things that came for me in the bathroom.
So, how about this TV? Get anything good on it?
I don't pretend like you don't know what I'm talking about, 'cause I know you saw them too. I could tell by the way you were swatting at the air.
Grandpa, I really don't want to talk about that. The main thing is you're better now.
You're right. I'm better. For now. But those things, they're not going to stay away for good.
He was right, and I knew it. He was better, but he was dying. He didn't say it. He didn't have to. I glanced back at him, and I could see it in his face. I rushed over and hugged him as tight as I possibly could.
Now, there ain't no reason to go sobbing or moping around about it. It's just a fact of life. But the reason I brought it up in the first place is because when those things come back for me, I want you to do something for me.
I sobbed and held him so he wouldn't be able to leave me, ever. He tried to calm me down, but I wouldn't have it.
Sport, now listen to me. This is important.
He went to stand up, but I made myself dead weight to anchor him down, wailing even louder.
I don't want you to go.
Shh.
I don't want you to go.
It's all right. I just need you to do something for me is all.
I made such a fuss, though, he could hardly speak over me. I did it on purpose. I didn't want to hear what he was telling me. But every time I got louder, he just matched me, and then raised it another decibel.
You see those things? I want you to close your eyes, look away, or just get the heck out of there if you do.
He tried to tell me a few more times, but in the end, he just let me get all my weeping done and over. I cried him the stock of 2 funerals that day, and while I did so, he spoke lightly over the lulls when I suppurated so hard that I didn't even make a sound.
I don't want them figuring that since you can see them, that you're ready to go too. See, it ain't the first time I ever saw him. I saw him before, lots of times since I was a boy your age, and it weren't my time neither. I used to see him quite frequently, in fact, especially back in the war. I seen him take fellas like me, good men, and women, who don't mean no harm to no one. They led him somewhere bright. Yet, I seen him take others, people who weren't so good, and them shadow hands, they just come in and tear the soul right out of them and rip them apart.
Grandpa's words slurred and faded into a low chatter until they became one with my tears. I'm not saying that he joined me, as I never actually saw the man cry. Hell, I don't think he even had tear ducts. But he certainly wasn't laughing, that's for sure. And when I finally wept myself dry, I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. Me and Gramps, I thought, we could go back to our little world on our lot of land up north and just be kids again. Forever.
Hey y'all, this is Wendy Renee from Lake Avalon Entertainment. And I wanted to remind everyone, especially those who are following the adventures of Audrey and Mackenzie and their strange new acquaintance, Lewis, in a very deep well. New adventures are available right here at lakeavalonentertainment.com or your favorite podcast app. And we also wanted to thank our friends once more at the Weird, Wacky, Wonderful Stories podcast for spotlighting us most recently. If you haven't heard our interview with them or the very special episode of Nightshade entitled Mark Twain at the Pearly Gates, which followed that interview, check out episode 44 on their podcast channel. And while you're there, check out their other episodes too. Believe me, you will not be disappointed at all. By the way, this isn't an advertisement, it's a recommendation. Anyway, we hope you're enjoying this episode of Nightshade. Don't forget to explore all the other interesting tales that you can find right here at Lake Avalon Entertainment. Once again, thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the story.
And things were good, quiet for a while, but only for a while. Gramps slowed down a bit, and I encouraged it because I wanted to keep him around. That is, instead of pretending to go on dangerous adventures, we opted to engage in conversations over long, slow walks about mysterious and faraway places. Things like men colonizing Mars and underwater mermen who were the descendants of an ancient civilization that long ago slipped into the sea. In addition, we climbed a lot less trees and sank a lot more baited hooks. And since the pond would not freeze over for another 9 to 10 months, the only hockey we would get in would come via CBC playoffs or classic games and or whatever the local cable networks offered. But it sufficed, and I was happy because I had him right there beside me. Of course, I could tell that he was not as content with the situation as me. I could tell that he yearned for the excitement, and this concerned us all. For if it was one thing that we were not going to dissuade him of, it was getting out on the ice on a pair of blades and slapping a puck around. Like I said, we were Yoopers, and that meant that we were practically Canadians, save the right to bear arms and to tell the Queen where to stick it. And with the dominance of our Red Wings throughout the years, that meant hockey was as much our sport as it was theirs. And Gramps thrived on it. It was his NASCAR. It was his cigarettes and wine. In fact, it was Gramps and not Dad, go figure, who introduced me to hockey and taught me the ins and outs of the game, how to handle a puck, and how to skate, even though I never had the stomach for skimming the surface of the pond when it froze over. I just always felt like something was going to give, you know? That the ice would be too thin and crack under my weight. But Gramps, he got out there every day, providing my dad or grandma didn't stop him first. Watching him skate was truly something to behold, and though he never talked about it, according to the rest of the family, that's what he wanted to be when he grew up. Just like his hero, the great Gordie Howe. Unfortunately, his shoulder and his heart, as I was about to discover, kept him from ever going pro. In fact, after he got back from the war, all he could ever do was menial labor to make a living. But he loved his family, so he not once complained about it. That's what Grandma always said.
Your grandpa may have a hole in his heart, but the lieutenant's heart is big enough that it doesn't matter. He's strong and principled, and most of all, he loves you, Falcon. He loves all of us, very much. So don't fret too much over it. He's there for you now. He'll always be there for you.
As a matter of fact, Grandpa received the Purple Heart for his valor, having pulled a couple of his army buddies to safety before the bullet from a Vietnamese sniper shattered his right rotator cuff and another pierced his heart.
They say I died in the chopper, but I guess the fellow who's working on me just wasn't ready to watch me die in front of him.
We didn't catch any fish that brisk spring morning, but the air, about an hour into our trawling for catfish, it abruptly grew dense with a strange vapor, and in it, and all around us, clouds and clouds of fireflies put on a display that besides what I witnessed in the bathroom during Grandpa's first heart attack with the orbs and phantoms, I never saw the likes of before.
Look, Grandpa. There's so many of them. What are they doing?
Grandpa draped his arm around me.
There's a legend about fireflies, champ. That when they gather like this, they're actually not fireflies at all, but spirits of the dead come back to light the way for a lost soul.
I remembered what he told me when he was in the hospital, and I therefore asked him if I should close my eyes.
I don't see the bad things, the shadows, but maybe you ought to close them even so. I'm not sure what these buggers are really after.
Well, I closed my eyes like he advised, but I cheated, merely squinting, not entirely shutting my second eye. Swatting at the swarm, Gramps held me tight. I remember feeling frightened, yet strangely comforted by that. It felt good to be needed and loved. What's more, the swarm seemed to drive the chill straight out of the air, and they put on quite the stunning display. It looked as if the entire pond had actually burst into flames, but the inferno danced its ceremonial rumba, unbound and vigorously, without wreaking havoc like a normal fire would. Both of us watched in amazement, holding one another close and praying under our shallow breaths that the strange swarm brought with it nothing otherworldly, at least nothing from the place down below. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but being as young as I was, I guess I just couldn't quiet the urge to do so. I held out my hand and coaxed one of those glowy little buggers to land on my palm. It pulsated a vibrant array of colors. Its little legs twitched on my skin, and I closed it in with a desire to keep it as a pet. I didn't tell Grandpa what I had done because I didn't want him to get mad at me like before in the hospital. Hence I kept it a secret, which I never relinquished until now. I clasped the little bugger in my hand until I knew he wasn't looking, then reassigned it to my pocket. Interesting thing about that firefly. I'll tell you about it soon enough. For now, let's just keep to what happened next. The rest of the swarm must have gotten agitated by my actions because they became aggressive and even began to bite, if you can believe it. I started screaming and crying. Grandpa yelled at them and told them to leave us alone, and then went as far as to threaten them. Only his threat was strangely aimed at himself, and not to them.
You leave my grandson alone. Do what you will with me, but you leave Falcon be, or so help me, I'll not go with you. I'll go with the others when my time comes. I'll let myself slip into the shadows. You hear me? Leave my grandson alone.
Then, as if they actually understood, the swarm dissipated and left us to the quiet of our pastime. Grandpa said nothing, and neither did I. At least not for a while. And when he did finally break the silence, he told me that I should have listened to him, and he wasn't sure why they swarmed us, but that he also knew I was keeping something from him, and that when the time was right, I would fess up about it. Of course I never did, and for that I am forever repentant. Grandpa told me something else that day too. He told me that he would have to be leaving us soon, adding that I would have to be tough, like the little champ he taught me to be, because my folks and Grandma would need someone to lean on for a spell.
But if you do that for me, champ, I'll do something for you. You take my purple heart out of the display case in the den and toss it into this here pond on my next birthday, and I'll come back to say goodbye. Your dad will be awfully sore at you over it, and you might even get your bottom dusted for it. But I promise, I'll come back to see you.
And just as he said, he left us. It happened just before summer when I was in school.
What is that, Falcon? Is that your homework?
It's an airplane, Mom.
That wasn't the question, and you know it.
Come on. Tomorrow's the last day of school, okay?
You still need to do your homework if you have it. I want you to always do your best.
Okay, sure. But first I'm going to...
Stay here a moment, please.
I'll help with the dishes later. I promise, okay?
No, Falcon. It's not okay.
Mom?
He's gone, Falcon. The nurses called about an hour ago.
What? No!
Falcon.
What? Was it the Shadow Hands? Did they come for him?
They said he passed away peacefully.
How could this be?
We need to go down to the hospital and get all the paperwork so that we can make arrangements.
I just talked to him last night.
I need you, Falcon.
Mom?
I need you more than ever, Falcon. Please, help me.
I will, Mom. I will.
I never knew if he was visited by the orbs and phantoms, but I couldn't see a man like Gramps ever going to the bad place. So I always assumed that the little glowy things outnumbered the shadow hands when Grandpa's ticker at last stopped ticking. Thus the old place didn't seem as special as before. It seemed colder, even smaller somehow. Moreover, a lifeless, lackluster shell of what it once was. But as the old adage says, life does go on, and we were no exception. And just as I promised, I spent less time doing the things I liked and more time with my folks and my grandma, even though they didn't do much but mope around and weep. I even kept my word about the Purple Heart, and just like he predicted, I got a spanking over it. And I went out there every day and waited. Only he never came. After about a year, I visited the pond less frequently, until my monthly outing became an every few months thing, and then an annual thing, until eventually I grew up, and it grew old, and my family moved down to the city, deep on the flip side of old Mackinac. We kept the house as a summer getaway, however, and I made it a point, for a few years after getting my driver's license, to go and visit the old place every now and then. On one particular visit, I brought along a girl I had been seeing for the better part of the year prior. I know it sounds terrible, but I can remember everything about her but her name. Perhaps this is a voluntary phenomenon spawned by the fact that we were both part of something so traumatic that by denying her a name, it somehow seems less tangible and therefore hurts not as much. Cowardly as it may seem, I see it as a defense mechanism, one that provides me the option to negate the prolonged suffering I would otherwise have to share with or without her if I were to put a name to her memory. I don't know. I guess I just couldn't bear to live out the rest of my days, as does the guy who loses his only daughter to a drunk driver and spends the rest of his days, every free moment of them, laying on her grave, utterly shattered, unable to let her go. Hence refusing my girl a name, I wholly believe, is my way of coping, of surviving. Yet, for sake of giving the poor girl some kind of identity, and for sake of the narrative, we'll call her Mary. What is certain is that I cared about her, and the year we spent together is as vivid to me as what happened yesterday. And though I wasn't yet sure at the time if she was the one I wanted to bring home to meet the family, we got along pretty well, and she seemed to fit. She had a pretty form, her laugh didn't annoy me much, and her kisses were comparable to pumpkin roll. And if you're a pumpkin roll connoisseur, a certifiable helpless junkie of the alluring little pastry like I was, you know what that meant for the rest of what goes on behind closed doors. And for all these reasons, I was lending some serious consideration to going ring shopping. But on that day, amid our long country drive, I'm not sure if it was the droning spatter of the tireless rain off the windshield, or the cold on the bitter air, or the fact that I had recently stumbled upon certain details The kind of details that no one should discover about his or her lover, regarding the relationship that came before ours. But we were going at it like cats and dogs from the very moment we hit the road, and there seemed to be no relief in sight. Mary's main gripe went as follows.
You say you love me, then why don't you trust me?
A defense as old as time. I just dodged it and raged on with my barrage of reasoning. Your ex told me that you messed around on him behind his back. How do I know you aren't doing the same to me? Her only rebuttal was,
Are you dating him? Or are you dating me?
yeah, we threw back and forth like that for a while. Some of it logical and some of it primarily what came from yours truly, mind you. Quite foolish and with the tang of emotional haste. I always did speak primal when I was upset. In fact, I think I may have actually lost IQ points as my blood pressure increased, and at the rate I was going, I would devolve to the state of chimpanzee by the time we arrived at the old place. Perhaps be reduced to a single-cell organism before we set out to return. Short skirts!
What?
All I get is stupid penguin sweats, but everyone else gets pretty you.
It's just that I feel comfortable around you.
Oh, so now Grandma and me are on equal ground.
You need professional help. You know that?
Flip-flops and no sex!
Was that English?
How do you expect me to react?
It's a little thing called trust.
That's not the point. You gave to him and evidently others it. But me? Oh no. I'm lucky to make it to second base with you, babe.
Is that what this is all about? I thought we had something special.
Now the argument, as I recall, had reached that boiling point, as heated discussions so often do. And some things were said that motivated us to give each other the silent treatment. But silence can sometimes be deafening. And since I was never one who felt comfortable driving in the low din of the quiet, under the veil of the rumbles and squeaks of an old car in motion and, of course, a lulling rainfall, I turned to the singing sounds of the radio to give me solace like an old friend. However, this subtle exploit must have been read by her as deliberate and aggressive in some way, because she immediately, as soon as the first few keys of my favorite Elton John song husked the arid atmosphere inside my classic Studebaker, the one that Gramps left me, of course, she reached over and flipped the switch back to the off position. Now, I was in no mood for her silly antics, so I wasted no time in reversing her crass maneuver, and this led to a series of on and off again dial switching, which became ever aggressive. Yet the only thing that we seemed to be putting in harm's way was the poor radio, which sounded like it was playing around in the world's most sadistic game of musical chairs. Finally, I was so angered by the whole dumb argument that I turned the volume all the way up, then proceeded to pull the knob clean off the face of the stereo system and fling it out the window. She accordingly started screaming at me.
Stop the car right now. I want out, and I want as far away from you as I can possibly get.
And let me just go on the record by saying that nothing can overpower the shrill of a pissed-off woman. Not even the cruise and caws of Jim Morrison at max decibel level during the climax of When the Music's Over. And though I tried, oh so very tried, to block out the intrusive clamor, I broke in the end. And the two of us consequently engaged in an epic battle of character slurs that raged on like Joshua at the walls of Jericho, until at last I said something, and I'll refrain from repeating it, as I consider myself a gentleman despite my momentary loss of etiquette, that fueled in her the urge to strike me across the face. And let me tell you, she may have been a scrawny little thing, but she walloped with a hell of a force, one that, for lack of a better saying, had me seeing stars. And though I did not retaliate, I think, by and large, the only reason I didn't was because she nearly knocked me out, and I thus had little to no energy to do anything but maintain control, albeit hardly, of the speeding car. And to make matters worse, I was about to find myself the booger at the fingertip of fate's hand, for just around the bend, to which I was rapidly approaching, The road had been slicked over with an invisible glaze. We call it black ice in our parts. And once we hit it, I knew immediately that whatever lay on the opposite end of it, it wouldn't likely let us walk away with mere scratches. As we entered into a wild spin, I felt like a fool and wondered if old Gramps was looking down on me, shaking his head with condemnation. See, he would have been the first to tell me that if a woman is being faithful to you, it doesn't matter how she treated some other fella in the past. And here I was about to kill us both, and the whole thing might have been avoided if only I would have kept my big mouth shut. Perhaps it was my negativity that steered us to that very moment in time. Perhaps it was what put the ice on the road in the first place. Whatever the case, we were spinning out of control, and there was a line of cars headed straight at us. I tried to regain control, but destiny would hear nothing of it. It looked as though we were going to die, and strangely I had nothing to say about it, not even a holler. Go figure. Then just as we were about to collide with the oncoming traffic, something grabbed a hold of the old Studebaker and flung it out into the middle of the cornfield to our right. We spun and skidded and then began to roll. I don't know how many times the car tumbled before it finally came to rest. When it did, we were upside down. More notably, the roll had sparked a fire, and the car seemed to be leaking fuel, and lots of it. Now, I was still recovering from the little love tap my girlfriend had laid on me just moments before, and the accident didn't exactly knock me back to my senses, so it wasn't registering how urgent the situation actually was. As for my girlfriend, she was knocked clean out and was in pretty bad shape. See, her head went through the door window during the topple, and during one of the insurmountable tumbles we took, something grabbed hold of her left ear and ripped it off of her head. Blood was everywhere. I was stunned and horrified and groggy and feeling about as low as a cockroach, but I had to get us out of there. Therefore, I released my seatbelt and then forced the door open and crawled out. I could see that the fire was spreading quickly, and though I was still disoriented, I knew that my girl, if I was ever to see her smile again, had to be freed from that burning wreckage that was once my grandpa's prized possession. Stumbling to her side of the vehicle, I realized I had little to no time with which to work because the flames were licking in the direction to where the fuel line had been severed. And the wheel closest to it was still in motion, and its momentum was making the situation a veritable nightmare. Worse yet, it appeared that she was trapped because the door was bent to hell and thus permanently fused to the quarter panels of the Studebaker's passenger side. I'd have to pull her through the jagged cavity where the window used to be, and in order to do that, I needed to remove the pointy shards, which looked like the grin on a witch's puss. One by one, I yanked them out, cutting the dickens out of my hands in the process. But I at last had access to my girl. All I had to do now was hit the button to release the seatbelt and then pull her to safety. But you know how the old adage goes, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Well, it turns out that the seatbelt latch was jammed, and I didn't have my pocket knife on me. Ironically, all I had at my disposal were those shards of glass that I just cut my hands up on removing not a minute ago. Even so, I had to get her out of there. I actually don't remember how deep the slits in my hands were, or how many glass daggers I went through before I finally cut the strap in two, but I got her free. Alas, we were not out of the path of damage when the tank blew. It sent us soaring forward, me and her in my arms. I pushed her down when I felt the force of the explosion creep up behind me and fell on top of her when the fiery parts of the old Studebaker rained down upon us and all over the vast field of maize. Luckily, all the rain made everything so damp that the blaze didn't spread. It was terrible yet beautiful, which made me feel cursed and lucky all at once. I looked up and wondered if that's how it would appear during the time following Gabriel's trumpet call. Burning bits of everything dropping from the sky amid a constant miserable downpour. And would mankind actually survive long enough to be there? Regardless of how time might grind to an end, it seems the winner between the epic battle twixt good and evil would finally be decided at that juncture and I had a hunch that, unlike the chipper morning from long ago, when a dove and rainbow greeted Noah following his lengthy, wearisome journey, the end of days would look much like the scene in which I at present found myself a principal player. What's more, we may have walked away from the accident in one piece, but not unscathed. We weren't yet out of the woods. I could tell by the quick and abrupt shifts in temperature, and also by the movement in the distance. Beyond the cornfield, out on the horizon, where the clouds drifted low and brought with them wild and terrifying things, windswept, and, though I was uncertain, quite possibly wraith-like. And as I stood up and looked out, I felt just as I did in our bathroom when I was a little boy, during Grandpa's first heart attack, and then again out on the pond when the fireflies started biting. I squinted, trying to better focus on what was actually out there, praying that it wasn't what I knew in my heart it was. Then it became quite clear to me. There was no doubt now. They were in great numbers and headed our way, hastily. I glanced down at my girlfriend and realized why. She had stopped breathing, you see.
Honey? Honey, are you okay? Oh no. No. No, don't be dead. No. 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 Don't die. No.
I'm not sure for how long, but she was definitely showing no signs of being part of the living world, and I had little time left to do something about it. They were back, Grandpa's phantoms and orbs, and they were coming to make bids on her soul. Well, either hers or mine. I didn't want to find out. Thus, I knelt down to her, rolled her flat on her back, arched her head, and though I must confess that I paid little attention to the particulars during my class in first aid and rescue procedures, all the same, I began to fill her lungs with my breath and press concurrently on her chest, fast and with the zeal of a veteran plumber, or in that ilk.
Come on. Come on, honey. Breathe.
Nothing. The swarm of specters moved in and began to circle around us. The glowy things far outnumbered the shadow hands, but when the shadows made their move, they did not take kindly to me putting up a fight to defend my girl.
Get out of here. Get out of here. You can't have her. No.
In fact, at one point, as I endeavored to breathe for her and keep her heart pumping, a few of them latched themselves around my arms and wrists and damn near paralyzed me.
Oh.
And then they began to inch her away from me. I tried to resist, but their will was strong. They bit and clawed at me. The pain was indescribable.
Oh, jeez. Go on.
But what hurt the most was that I could do nothing to help the girl I was considering sharing my life with. Yet I was not the only one who seemed to have an interest in her well-being. You see, the lustrous little balls of light enveloped her, utterly, and then me. The light was so bright, in fact, that I thought I might go blind from it. I could feel the two ancient foes pulling at me and biting at each other. And the last thing I remember seeing before waking up in an ambulance was the sky, how the clouds broke and made way for a single point of light, wide enough for whole nations to bask in if they stood in a single file.
My God. My God. Look at it. Look at it. Oh.
It was like a lighthouse beacon, and inside of it were more of those little orbs than I could count. They seemed a part of the light, all of them working together to generate the power of the light itself. And they sang the sweetest sounds. Part of me wanted to follow them. Another part of me knew I wasn't ready. And the entire time, I could feel the dark, cold, icy grips of the shadow hands latched onto me, refusing to let me go. Then, darkness followed, and I am dumb to the rest. What I can tell you is that my lady friend survived. They found and reattached her ear, but she suffered a closed head injury during the ordeal. That to say the least, complicated her life in ways that spawned a grudge with my name on it. I sent her the proverbial repentant package, flowers, cards, a pledge to be at her side every step of the way on her road to recovery, but she never spoke with me again. I suppose it's just as well. Every time we would look at one another in the eyes, we would have been brought back to that moment. The only thing I don't understand is why they didn't take us.
Coming soon to Lake Avalon Entertainment.
The cosmos. That big, seemingly endless expanse of nothingness, dotted with little twinkly points of light. Guess what? It's filled with scum. And billions and billions and billions of little terrestrial balls and giant smelly gas masses. Wherein that scum can hide. My playground. See, one day, Ship and I were cruising around deep in the thick of it all when Ship, that's what I call my ship. Oh, that's when I met Spud. See, he's this weird little whiny potato dude I found playing Castaway. Apparently the last of his race. He's crying about it all the time. Don't get me started. Anyway, I decided to give him a job. I am from the proud lineage of theropods. Humans call them dinosaurs. I'm sort of a fantastic blend of both. At any rate, our mission is to round up the scum. Rubbish to some, lost treasures to others, not to mention the bad dudes. Yeah, we know where you're hiding. And we put things right, and or flip it for profit. These are the adventures of...
Dude, are you talking to yourself again?
No, I'm doing that promo thing. Man, I was really rolling with it too. Then you come along and soil the whole thing.
I didn't do anything except ask a question.
Unbelievable.
You're always blaming me for everything.
Tell me again why I let you tag along.
You'd still be sitting there in that truck stop if it weren't for me.
And here we go again.
Darn tootin'.
The Adventures of Nichols and Spud.
The years following the accident were difficult, dreadful, hapless. I just couldn't get past it. I wanted to let it go, but was overcome by guilt and then resentment. Thus I decided to put it all on Grandpa. I mean, he was the one who had me driving on that damnable road that damnable day during that damnable storm. Damn him for dying, for lying, for forsaking his best friend. I waited for him for 15 years. Every year I would go out there faithfully, and every year he would let me down. He never did come back to see me, and I hated him for it. In fact, I stopped believing in what older people told me after I numbed myself to the idea that my going up to the old place was senseless. And then, I stopped believing in everything, altogether. Last winter, however, I don't know why or what compelled me to do it. I drove up to the old place by myself. It was late, and I parked my new car, my new compact with all the bells and whistles attached, at the edge of the pond. Gramps would have hated it. I got out and drank in the still night air. It was freezing and yanked on the back of my throat going down, a blustery, wintry effect that Gitchigumi involves on its most northern counterparts, something I had forgotten about since moving south of the mighty Mac. The sky was spotted with the brilliance of 1,000,000 stars, more than ever shines to the light-polluted dome of the inner cities. I began to yell into the darkness, and when I was done, I began to weep. And then I realized how much I actually missed the old man. I take it back, Grandpa. I don't hate you. But you did lie to me. You lied to me. I sat there for the longest time. Too long, really. And awaited a response. But all I had for company were the cracking tree branches amid the winter's sway. Finally, I got up to return to my car, and that's when I heard the sound of blades on ice. They were at a distance, but there was someone definitely on the pond, and whoever it was steadily drew closer. For a moment, my heart raced, and I thought the old fella had come back to make me eat crow. But then I saw it was just some kid, some teenager, who must have been using the pond to practice upon. Hey, buddy, what are you doing out here? This is my family's property. The kid said nothing in return, just kept skating, with a big grin painted on his face. Outraged, I dashed out onto the ice without thinking. Now keep in mind that I never did get over my fear of frozen ponds, but this was my pond, a sacred pond, and it infuriated me that the kid would disrespect it, and me, the way he was. Hey, man. Hey, I'm talking to you, kid. I told you this is private property. Now you're gonna have to leave. Then the kid scratched to a dead stop, turned to me, and dropped the puck to his feet. And with a wink, he zipped off to the other side of the ice, where he had erected a net, which he stood in front of and crouched to a position I was very familiar with. As odd and arrogant as it sounds, he seemed to be coaxing me to challenge his guard. Kid, I don't want to play. I just want to go home. And you're stopping me from doing just that. No. I can't let you stay here on this pond, okay? It might not be safe. But he just stood his ground, grinning. Look. I don't even have a stick, man. Now I'm serious. You're gonna have to leave. Of course he didn't. What's more, he started deriding me, making chicken noises and whatnot. He even slid a second stick my way, stopped a few feet from the puck. Kid has skills, I thought. Alright, fine. Let's see what he's made of. One shot. You hear me? One shot, that's all you get. Just do what Gramps taught you. I slid on over and picked up the stick. I didn't know what the kid was really after, but I figured I'd shoot him out a wager nonetheless. Jeez. Cold out here, huh? Alright, listen. Here's my proposition, alright? How about this? You stop me, and I'll let you practice here. But, if I score on you, you pack up your gear and vamoose. Deal? I didn't hear anything back, so I figured he was cool with the stakes, and that there was no further need for chat. So I drew in a deep, meditative breath of fresh air, and then kicked the puck forward off my heel. My heart fluttered and I licked my chapped lips with anticipation. Okay. Now don't release too early, but don't wait too long. I slid my sneakers back and forth over the rough, icy surface, batting the puck side to side off the blade of my stick, just like Grandpa taught me. The kid moved in accordance to my every maneuver. He seemed to have the instincts of a cat. Get in close. Drive him to one side with a nice clean tuck, then pull it back and fire it home. I was now right on the doorstep. He was going for it. Just one more second. Get it up high. That's what Grandpa always said. I made my move, sliding past the net, looking back to see if I had turned the kid inside out the way I had intended. But I didn't. He read me like a book. How? What went wrong? I couldn't believe my eyes. And to top it all off, I lost my footing and nearly broke my arm and leg trying to break my fall. The kid just chuckled, dropping the puck from his trapper and back onto the ice.
You tried to go 5-hole on me. Should've went up high, champ. Should've went up high.
What? What did he say? I didn't know if it was just coincidence or if the cold had me seeing and hearing things, or if I had actually gone nutty. But at that moment, I realized that the big dumb kid who encroached on the sacred pond of my family's lot wasn't the guy who guarded the goal. It was me. As I attempted to regain my footing and go off for the man, or so he seemed, who I had begrudged for so very long now, a set of open arms or a handshake at the very least, I heard a crack. And then another. Oh my God. And then all I felt was wetness and the icy grips of Hades pulling at me. I struggled to get back to the surface, but it was too dark under there to find. That's how quick it can happen. Then I realized, as I drank in the seriousness of my dilemma, that I had once been in the presence of a light so bright I could see nothing past its eternal warmth, and failed to heed to its promise and its warning that I was on a collision course with self-destruction, and would hence not see old Gramps again if that came to fruition. And now I found myself immersed in the frigid darkness of potential damnation, utterly blind and helpless. And it all came down to this one moment, my whole existence, whether or not anything I perceived in the events leading up to it were on par with the reality that the rest of the world recognizes. I was now in the grips of death. Not my grandpa, not his buddy back in Nam, not my lady friend, but me. And it gave me some time, not much albeit, to ponder how I got to that moment and what my life had meant thus far. Had I been a good or bad person? Would the eternal light have me? Or would it leave me to the darkness in which I was currently imprisoned? I didn't have to wait too long to get my answer. You see, I felt a hand wrap around my ankle and begin to pull me down even deeper. Then another, and yet one more after that. I felt the hands of a dozen damned souls pulling me down to them, into the sufferings that dwell in the proverbial place below. I felt darkness, in its purest and most profound form, encase me, cut off my breath, and then also my will to put up a fight. But I guess the old feller, my best buddy, my grandpa, like the medic who worked tirelessly to save him back in Southeast Asia, amid some war now archived in the annals of things we as humans think are so important at the moment and later wonder what the hell was that all about anyway. At least, I don't think he was ready to give up on me either. Wasn't ready for me to keep company with him or watch me slip into obscurity, depending on how you look at it. Because a glow suddenly illuminated the entire plane up above, and I could see the hole in which I had fallen. Now, do you remember me telling you about that secret I kept in my pocket, back when Gramps and I were kids and best chums so very long ago? Well, I had placed the little bugger a few years back into a tiny container, a bauble made out of blown glass that my grandma had given me some time following Grandpa's passing, and I laced a leather strap to it and wore it around my neck religiously. It hadn't proved to be a good luck charm, as I had hoped it would. A car accident was proof of that. All the same, I never left home without it, and today was no exception. Thank God. For what happened next defies all reason, and yet makes all my plight obligatory. Somehow, if you can believe it, the little bugger was still alive, or had the similitude of being so. It lit up the little trinket and tried to pull away from my neck vehemently. In fact, it behaved like a pissed-off bee in a jar, and its fury prompted the light above to glow even brighter, and, in turn, the little glass container to act as a beacon. In doing so, it startled the shadow hands that had grabbed hold of me, and for the very first time in the murky depths of our pond, I could see the rest of them, the faces behind the shadows. They were terrible, bitter, and lifeless, like Michelangelo's self-portrait on the wall of the Sistine Chapel. I struggled to free myself from them, and dared not look too long into the void of their black eyes. Then, my talisman finally lived up to its purpose, for its glow intensified to such a degree that the shadows in the darkness let go, and not a second too soon. I thrust myself up toward the chasm in which I had fallen, a cloud of bubbles trailing behind me, my lungs burning and empty. And when I at last broke the surface, all I saw was a swarm of fireflies that I had not seen the likes of since that day just before Grandpa died. And then a hand. A big, friendly, wonderful hand that I eagerly grabbed hold of. My eyes burned in the brisk air. And I had a hell of a time focusing because of it. But I felt the comfort of Gramps' sturdy arms pulling me back onto the safety of the shore. The glow stayed with me long enough for me to be warmed by it, and then it faded as quickly as it came and returned me to the lonesome cold of the night. The fireflies were gone once again, but I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Then I reached up to put my hand on Grandpa's arm, only he wasn't there. In his place, a very old tree. It, leaning over and its roots exposed, had evidently caught onto my coat and wrapped around me when I reached up in desperation to catch a breath. Is that possible? Is that even believable? All I know is that's how it happened. But here's the kicker, the creme de la creme, the single most important factor that restored my faith in all things grand and small, the tree to which I owe my life. Regardless on what may or may not have transpired on that icy pond that night, regardless of how much you believe what I've told you, it was brandished with a badge, around one of its exposed roots to be exact, that expressed its loyalty to our family of Upers, and its heroic feat by having saved me from the grips of an icy grave. It was my grandfather's Purple Heart.
Join us again soon for another episode of Nightshade. Episode 4, Fireflies on the Frozen Pond, features the voices of Heidi Lynn as Mary, Stephen Krause as a young Falcon Haley, Robin Mudge, the mother, Matt Grammatico as Grandpa, and Casey Krause as the narrator. This has been a Lake Avalon production of an original story by Kurt C. Krause. Additional dialogue by Robin Mudge. Please visit LakeAvalonEntertainment.com for more information on our cast and crew, as well as some fun extra content. Be sure to explore all of Lake Avalon while you're there. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Nightshade on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Leave us a like, a comment, or a review that might help us reach more podcast lovers like you. Can't find us on your favorite place for podcasts? Email Robin Mudge at LakeAvalonEntertainment.com or interact with us on social media and let us know. For more information on upcoming projects, email Casey Krause at LakeAvalonEntertainment.com. That's KACEEKRAUSE at LakeAvalonEntertainment.com. Thank you so much for listening, and may your life be far from normal.